Good afternoon. Welcome back in to the PowerMizzou.com podcast midweek. That means it's our Yuengling opponent preview show. I am Gabe DeArmond with PowerMizzou.com. We will have our guest joining us momentarily, but as always, want to remind you our pregame and postgame shows this year brought to you by Yuengling, America's oldest brewery. Yuengling is available across the state of Missouri. Also this week, it's Vanderbilt coming to town. I know it's available across the state of Tennessee because I used to sometimes buy Yuengling in Tennessee and smuggle it back to Missouri. I'm told Yuengling calls those people actually smugglers that get it in states it's not available, or it is available, and bring it back to their home state. So a one-time Yuengling smuggler, I now just go to the store and buy it. Encourage you to do the same. As always, enjoy responsibly. We certainly encourage that. Everything we do on this show is responsible. That's why we have my friend Chris Lee from VandySports.com on here to responsibly preview the Vanderbilt Commodores. Chris, what's up, man?
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. So let's start here. August, I think most Missouri fans looked at this game as, hey, yeah, we got to play it, but it's probably a win. And then Vandy goes out and does what Vandy did in week one, and they kind of raised some eyebrows, and everybody said, oh, hang on, maybe not the same old Vandy. And then last week happened. Like, what happened?
Well, hey, this would have been a lot more fun matchup if it was a pair of 3-0 teams. And it was clear, Clark Lee talked about it in Tuesday's media availability. They didn't have everybody's attention. There were guys late to meetings. There was a focus element that's off. And in the era of the transfer portal, when you got 50-something new guys, that tends to happen from time to time. I think it's a reality for everybody. But it's a reality that when you're Vanderbilt, you got to manage. You can't take anything for granted. If they had won the game, Gabe, the story would have been that Diego Pavia led them to 2 touchdown drives in the final 3 minutes, and they won a game, just as it kind of was similar to that in the Virginia Tech game. But the bottom line is their defense let them down. They couldn't cover man-to-man with their corners late in the game, and that's why they lost.
Explain to me, because I turned that game on I got home from, Mizzou played earlier in the day. I got home, I turned that game on, and there were about 3 minutes left, and Vandy scores, takes the lead and all that. So you said on that last drive, a 7-play, 75-yard, 59-second drive. Why are they playing man-to-man there?
Well, I say they played some man, they played some zone, but I guess a better way to put it is their corners couldn't stay on the guys they were assigned to late, whether it was man or zone. They end up in single coverage, when the ball was thrown is, I guess, a better way to put it. I'm not a technical guy, but what I mean is that I would put the responsibility on their corners and one guy in particular who got burned a couple times on that drive.
That makes sense. And so let's start there with the defense. I know that Vandy's without one of the guys that Eli Drinkwitz called one of the best defensive players in the SEC for a half because of targeting ejection. What is this Vandy defense? Is it better than it's been, or is it kind of that group that gave up a 75-yard drive to a not very good offense to lose a game?
Well, it's better than it's been, but you bring up a key point. They're going to be without C.J. Taylor for a half because of a targeting ejection that I thought was borderline at best. Don't get me started on how that call is adjudicated these days. I think it's awful. But Taylor, I'll give you a thing that Missouri fans can remember. If you remember when they played last time at Columbia, I think Vanderbilt got a sack or a strip 6 or something like that, and he was the guy that hurled the fullback blocker to make the play. If you remember that play, I think it went viral. Okay, yeah. That's who they're missing for the first half. Now, having said that, I think they used the portal to get better on defense. They've got a lot more depth up front, the defensive line, although a couple of the key guys, probably the 2 biggest additions that they have had there, Zaylen Wood and Corday Sidner, have both been missing lately due to injury. I think Sidner's going to be back. I think Wood is going to be out. Both of them were big in that win over Virginia Tech. They've got a really good linebacker in Langston Patterson, all SEC type, and they got a kid named Raymond Fontenette who plays at star, which is the hybrid linebacker safety, who's really good, TCU transfer. And I think they're better at corner, but they're still not good. They're pretty good at, I think, Missouri's kind of short passing game, where they those screens and stuff like that. I feel like most of the year they've been in position to take care of the short to intermediate stuff, and they've been really good at making tackles. I think that's where, if you're looking for a spot where you say defensively they maybe win the matchup more than you'd think, that's a possibility. I think where they're in trouble is when Missouri starts throwing the deep ball downfield. They had issues covering that last week. They gave one up against Virginia Tech a couple weeks ago. And it's been hit and miss for Missouri. I've seen some of their games where Brady Cook was just off a little bit on some of those throws early on. But I think that's where, with Burden and Weiss and Cooper and all the guys they've got, I think that's where they really present a danger to Vanderbilt.
That is music to Missouri fans' ears, because like Missouri is one of the most efficient offensive teams in the country and one of the least explosive. Like, they just haven't had any big plays. They've been going down the field 6, 7, 8 yards at a time, which has worked. But at some point, you're going to need to hit a big play. I know Missouri fans would like to see that this week. So, look, the main focus of this team, let's flip sides of the ball. And I like to steal this phrase, but I always credit them when I use it. It comes from the Solid Verbal podcast. Is Vanderbilt building the entire plane out of Diego Pavia this year?
Well, yeah, probably. And it's not a bad idea. That
it's
kid
not a terrible plan. Yeah.
And Gabe, let me tell you, I'm about 5'10", 5'11" ish. And I'm not sure Diego Pavia is taller than me, but I mean, he's got a heart as big as the room I'm in. And it's not just the stats on paper. It's the stuff that he does. Like, it's like watching, and I'm going to overdo it to make a point. Okay. It's like, you remember when we grew up watching Magic Johnson, and like, he's bringing the ball down the floor and like, he could do this, this, or this. And then he does it number 4 option that you weren't even considering. And it's spectacular and it works. That's kind of what Diego Pavia is like. You look at the play where they got the tying score against Virginia Tech, and they've got a quarterback run kind of outside the left hash, and there's one safety out there, and he sees it, and in a split second, he flips his hips, throws just a quick pass to Cedric Alexander, and they get an easy touchdown. It looks like a running play. Half a second later, it's a pass play. He just does stuff like that as it pops into his head that you just can't defend, because he does things you're not used to seeing, and he has been the difference in this offense.
So I made an analogy with Diego Pavia that I think you'll appreciate because we're similar ages. I said, what you can't let Diego Pavia do is run around like a family circus cartoon. You remember those things that would have the trail? Like, and look, I am a fan of a team that has a quarterback that everybody says he's better when everything goes to hell, right? Like, he's good dropping back in the pocket. But when you really don't want Patrick Mahomes is when everything is broken and he just can do whatever he wants. Pavia strikes me that way. I'm not saying he's Mahomes, but I'm saying when you have everything covered and he just has to make it up, he seems better to me than when it's scripted.
No, I don't think that's off target. And the thing that you worry about is like a turnover in the spot where he does something that somebody's just not expecting. But you haven't really seen that yet. They've turned it over once as an offense this year. That was a blindside sack on the third play of the game last week, where that was on their right tackle rather than him. So yeah, I think I think that's a good way to put it.
Missouri just played, a mobile quarterback in Thomas Castellanos from Boston College. When I watched him play the first couple of weeks, I thought, he's a good player. He scares you some. Two things I didn't know about him. Number one, he doesn't look to me like a guy that can just take over a game running. Like, he's running and you can't stop it. He also doesn't look like a guy, if you take away the run, he can beat you throwing. Pavia to me looks like the first. Like, you can know he's running and sometimes it doesn't matter. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, he's not the fastest guy, but he's just so good with the ball. That you just don't know where it's going to go, and so you have to account for a lot of things. That probably gets him a little bit more room. And to the passing side, Gabe, he's been super accurate. I mean, they've done a really good job of getting one-on-one matchups, and he's done almost an A+ job of putting the ball right where he needs. They've run a couple of plays this year to the end zone where it's either going to be the guy makes a catch or it's out of bounds, but the defender isn't going to get it. And he's made those throws perfectly. I that was a surprise. I didn't know that was really part of the package, and I don't know that I really saw it in fall camp. But when the lights come on and he's got to execute, he's been wonderful about making those throws.
I know that Eli Drinkwitz specifically mentioned Vanderbilt's tight ends as a concern. I know they lost Jaden McGowan to the transfer portal to Boston College. Ironically, he's basically their punt returner. Like he doesn't really do anything else up there. Does Vanderbilt have the weapons on the outside to threaten Missouri, or is this kind of a tight end, shorter passing game?
I think they probably got the least talented receiver room in the league. No, they got some guys. Quincy Skinner's a nice player. Junior Sherrill's a nice player who's been probably underutilized. And I think they are good at tight end. Eli Stowers, who was with Pavia last year at New Mexico State, caught 11 balls for like $110 last week. He's thrown a touchdown, so and he did that at New Mexico State too, so you got to watch that. They've got a real rapport. I think their best player in either of those rooms is a kid named Cole Spence, who's caught one pass this year. He's been hobbled. I think he and Stowers are both. I think Stowers is going to play this week, but he's hobbled. And I don't know about Spence. Spence is a 6'7" kid who can run pretty well and can catch it. And just, I thought was maybe their best player on offense in fall camp, but maybe the injuries or just the preference for Stowers have gotten in the way. I don't think they are explosive in that group, but they do have a couple of tight ends and maybe a third guy in Cam Johnson who was good in camp that can help. I think they beat you more through maybe those guys than I don't think when we're talking about this, Saturday night, I don't think it's going to be a game where Skinner goes for $150 or Sherrill goes for $120. I think but you may be talking about a tight end later.
All right. So look, and I understand when you are Vandy, when you're trying to fight your way up from the bottom of this league, like any schedule kind of looks, when you're the 15th or 16th best team in the league, any schedule looks daunting because everybody looks good. But I'm just going to read off the schedule for the people watching or listening. And I want to preface this with, does the SEC hate Clark Lee personally? Because here's Vandy's SEC schedule. At Missouri, home for Alabama, at Kentucky, home for Texas, at Auburn, home for South Carolina, at LSU, home for Tennessee. Like, there are, in a perfect world, maybe 3.5 games you can argue Vandy has a decent shot in. Like, and that's a road game. That's a game against South Carolina, against Kentucky, against Auburn. Those are not easy games, but those are the easiest games on Vandy's schedule.
Yeah, I mean, you almost wish like the Alabama and Texas games were on the road because they're going to be
always said when you're not good
anyway. Yeah,
I've said when you're not good, play your toughest games on the road because you're going to lose to those teams no matter where you play. So give me the borderline teams at home where I have a little leg up.
Yeah, well, and it goes beyond that at Vanderbilt. I'm sure I don't know that when you've been to the games in Nashville with me, I don't think Missouri ever had Vanderbilt outnumbered. But that's one of the few fan bases where it doesn't
like
happen.
50-50.
Yeah, I mean the stadium is now 30,000 seats, and when Alabama and Texas come here, it's going to be 20 to 25,000 of their fans, which and I didn't mention Tennessee yet. It's going to be that for sure. Right. I mean that's 3 of your 4 SEC home games where you're outnumbered, and the other one's South Carolina, and they'll bring a bunch of people if they're feeling good at the end of the year.
I've got to think any path to a bowl game involved beating Georgia State, right?
Yes, I think it had to. I mean, now you have to really squint. You have to say, okay, you got to beat Ball State. They're probably going to be a 20-point favorite in that one if you had to handicap it today. You look at South Carolina is I feel like a winnable game if you watch them play, especially if Sellers is hurt. But, I mean, Carolina's won that game like, I don't know. I think they played every year, and I think the last time Vanderbilt won was 2008. And a lot of those have been close, but they just can't get over the hump. So I think that's one. I think at Auburn's one. I think they get that in November, which the nice thing about that, Gabe, is you don't know where it's going to go at Auburn, right? And there's some programs.
Diego Pavia knows something about winning at Auburn.
Yeah, and if people don't know what we're talking about, he won there last year at New Mexico State. And by the way, they got a lot of the same offensive staff, Jerry Kill, Tim Beck. So they know. And like Auburn, like you're switching your quarterback in week 3. And Hank Brown's from Nashville. He wasn't this kid that everybody was talking about. He was a good player at Lipscomb Academy, but he's not the second coming of Cam Newton or somebody like that. So, like, if that doesn't go well at Auburn, when it goes badly at Auburn, it usually goes really badly. So that's one like you like to have that one in November, maybe rather than September. Maybe you're still in the fight and they're just disinterested. So that's one. And then the Kentucky game, the last time they were up there, and Kentucky can't score right now, it would appear. So I think that, that could be one of those 14-13 games where, whoever catches a break can win. But yeah, I mean, that's probably your path, because those other games, the other one at LSU, I mean, maybe if it goes really poorly for Brian Kelly and people have got one foot out of the portal, and somewhere else, maybe, but that's still Tiger Stadium at night. And that's a long, and I feel like LSU kind of got a reprieve by winning at South Carolina. So that one feels that you had to really squint to see that one anyway. And now that feels like after the weekend, that's pretty much off the radar, a possibility.
I mean, I find it interesting that you did not mention this weekend's game is one of those. I understand Missouri has a big advantage. They're a 20-point favorite, something like that. But this game has been, Eli Drinkwitz mentioned it yesterday, other than the COVID year, like, his teams have had trouble with Vanderbilt.
Yeah, they have. And I mean, look, if they played it 100 times, Missouri's not going to win 100, I don't think. Right. But I mean, I think the scenario is if Vanderbilt's going to pull an upset, and I think that's a game where Clark Lee probably got their team. And look, Gabe, they are a better team, right? They're definitely a better team than they were last year. But you just look at the athletes Missouri's got across the board. I don't think they've got, though. They certainly don't have a Luther Burden. And I think Eli's a smart coach. I think that their ability to generate the big play is just something that Vanderbilt's had trouble with and had trouble with stopping. And that's, I just think it's I would put that much lower. Look, I think they got a better probably chance to beat Missouri than they do Alabama or Texas, but after that, or Tennessee. But after that, but it's still still a huge ask. And I just realistically pretty hard to see it.
And I want to be clear before I say this, that for anybody who might be listening from Vanderbilt, this is my words. This is the way I'm phrasing this question. This is not Chris Lee's statement. Vanderbilt's not going to do something stupid and get rid of Clark Lee. Like his job's not in danger, is it?
Per a conversation I had right before this show, I don't think it is.
Okay. Because at some point you have to understand how difficult the job is and stick with the guy and give him some time. And like, look, I know they gave Derek Mason 6 or 7 years. It's not like they moved on from him at the drop of a hat, but like I don't know, just watching Vandy from the outside, it's not every week by any means, but you do see some signs. I mean, he runs an adult football program and they're trying to do things that, and you can see some signs that they're improving.
Well, I'll give you 2 reasons why I don't think he's gone. Number one, their NIL is so far behind. It's not well organized. They still don't have a great plan. I think they know they need to figure that out consistently. Now, they did for a spell last fall and winter. They're grabbing kids in the portal that are quality players. And you're hearing stories of big money coming in. You're like, hey, wait a minute. And I think that's a path for them to win. I mean, like, if you're Vanderbilt, you got money from boosters. You could write checks as big as anybody if you really wanted to. Mm-hmm. And I think they're going to have to outbid. Like if they're in a bidding war with, Georgia, Missouri, and Tennessee for a player, and the other teams are capping it at 500, you probably got to be, 700 or above.
You got to pay that losing tax a little bit. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. You absolutely do. But I think that's one thing. I think they know that he's not really had a fair shot with that. Now, some of that's Clark Lee's fault. The other thing I would say is, like, at Vandy, you've always got to find a way to win, right? And every time there's an opening, one thing you always hear is somebody out there going, they need to go hire Jeff Monken from Army and run the triple option. Well, I don't know that you can win consistently in the SEC with that. And also what happens if you get rid of Jeff Monken, you've recruited triple option guys to whatever you're going to, and if you think rebuilding is hard at Vandy, try that. But what I think what they did was really smart, Gabe. They don't run a triple option offense, but they run the closest thing in the SEC that you'll see to it. And they got a quarterback who knows how to do it. They got his head coach, who's their head offensive analyst. That's Jerry Kill. He's basically head coach of the offense. They got Tim Beck, who's their coordinator. And now they got something to where every week when you're preparing for them, you got to prepare for things that you don't see. And can your scout team quarterback replicate Diego Pavia? That's probably not really easy to do. And so it was smart because it's a way to win with stuff that you're throwing at other people that they're never going to see again the whole season, but it's not going all the way to triple option to where you have the issues that come with that. And by the way, who wants to come play for a triple option offense in the SEC? Your recruiting cell probably becomes pretty tough too.
So you mentioned NIL, and look, there's two ways to look at this, right? Number one is if you don't get NIL figured out in this league, you cannot compete. Yeah. Number two is NIL is opening avenues to schools that haven't had them open before. Missouri is showing that. Ole Miss is showing that. Vanderbilt people, by and large, make good money. If they care about football, there is a path there, right?
Gabe, you and I have hung out at the SEC tournament in Nashville before. And if we were to walk out the door and go down a walk within a half mile of whatever direction, you would see two names in Ingram and Frist on buildings in downtown Nashville. And they are huge. Those families are huge donors to Vanderbilt. So you've and I think they've given to their NIL. You were hearing some really crazy stuff like Mark Cuban's daughter goes to Vanderbilt. I never could verify this. I probably never could, but there were rumors that Mark Cuban was writing some nice checks in. And NIL is like Sasquatch. It's like you can't you can't really prove it. You probably see what
true.
You want to
there
see.
Are no rumor or there are no rules, whatever.
Right. I mean, the point is you never know, but also the point is those are huge names. Those are billionaire families. Now, the problem is billionaires didn't get to be billionaires by just throwing money into the river. And for an investment to be made, you got to be convinced that it's throwing good money after good product. I think that's where they run into trouble. But, man, if they ever just decided, come hell or high water, this is what we're going to do, I think the number of schools in the league that could get those big checks like they can, you're probably looking at maybe A&M in Texas. And after that, I don't know that there is another team.
Yep. For those who don't know, Chris not only runs vandysports.com, he's also with Southeastern 16. You guys do daily stuff. Watch a lot of it. I love the just quick 9-minute previews, right? Because sometimes I don't want to wade through an hour show. So just hit you guys do previews for everybody. So I wrote a thing the other day, the path to the SEC getting 6 teams in the college football playoff. There is a mathematical way that 6 SEC teams can win 11 games or more. Now, it all involves them not losing to anyone but each other, right? Which is probably pretty unlikely. But if I give you an over-under of, I think they'll get 5 teams in the playoff, but I think 6 is more likely than 4.
Feels like it. I was looking at some, and look, I don't know how much stock we need to put in power rankings at this point, because I don't know how you can equalize, I don't
know if Boston College is good, so I don't know if Missouri's good. I don't know if NC State's good, so I know Tennessee's good, but I don't know how good.
Well, and I'll go a step further. You're trying to make an equivalence between Ole Miss blowing out Furman and MTSU with what Georgia did against Clemson. I just think we're not far in, but I keep a kind of a set of composite power rankings just to kind of look down the road and say, what would the line be? And oh, by the way, Missouri, but by this is favored in 11 of 12 games, just for your information. The closest one they're not favored.
I think it might end up that way.
Yeah, I think it might. The question will be Texas A&M, and I don't think we really know what they are yet. And I think that's a road game. But in any case, right now that's got 5 of the top 6 teams in the country as SEC teams. Ohio State's the only team in there. Missouri's the 6th team. They're a little further behind. the computers don't like them as much. I'm not here to tell you that's
And I
right
don't
or
even
wrong,
think
but it just
Missouri
is.
fans at
But
this point, I don't even think Missouri fans at this point would argue with that. Like, they haven't done
yeah,
quite as much as those top 5 teams yet.
well, I mean, it's a lot of these teams don't play but one or two significant games anyway. Like the Big Ten last year. It's like, let's wait till Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State all play each other. They don't play anybody else the rest of the year. And then it's, and that's one thing as an aside, I kind of like more about college football and all this NIL thing is even the playing field. I think you're seeing the game, at least at the very top, be more competitive. I mean, to me, it's more fun than when it's like, okay, which of these 6 or 7 teams can win the national title rather than, are you taking Alabama or the field or Georgia the field? I think this is more fun. And my apologies, I'm rambling, but I mean, back to what you said, it feels like 5 feels like a really strong bet at this point. I think Missouri's good enough and got the schedule to get to 6.
Oh, and of course, like, hey, this whole discussion changes if Tennessee goes to Norman and loses this weekend. Then Missouri becomes 5, and Tennessee becomes
Yeah.
6, and hey, has to fight their way back up. So things like that are going to happen throughout the season, but it's going to be super interesting. I think we would both be a little bit surprised if Saturday's game goes down to the wire.
Yeah.
But I never ask people for predictions or anything. But if Vanderbilt's going to pull this off or come close, it's going to happen. Why?
Turnover margin in their favor. That's always a given in a game like this, and make something with them. Get a pick 6, get a short field where you punch in a touchdown. I think third downs are big things. I think holding Missouri. Yeah, like I remember watching the opener, and Brady Cook was just that much off his long throws. You're kind of hoping for some good fortune if you're Vanderbilt, because I think the way you beat them is go deep to Burden and some of those guys. And I think athletically, those guys are going to get open. It's just is the pass going to be delivered? And the other thing is Vanderbilt will send the kitchen sink at you at times. So how does Missouri handle it when Vanderbilt sends more guys? Can they block? Can your guy get home before he gets rid of the ball? I think it's a narrow path to victory for them. But if Vanderbilt were to shock everybody, I think it looks something like that.
And if you're on Missouri side, I go into this going, the only thing you can't let happen is you got beat because Diego Pavia ran for 150 yards. Like, if
Yeah.
you get beat some other way, you just get beat some other way. But that's the one thing you can't allow to happen. It's kind of like, hey, I'll let 8 San Francisco Giants beat me, but Barry Bonds is not beating me, right? Diego
Yeah.
Pavia's legs can't be the reason you lose this game, or that's a poor job on Missouri's part.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. If you don't have a spy on him at all times, your defensive coordinator probably needs a talking to after the game.
Yep. All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate it, man. Everybody check out not only Chris's stuff at vandysports.com, but Southeastern 16 on YouTube. Hey, you were Southeastern 14 for a while. You had to rename it. I hope you get to stay Southeastern 16 for a little while. I hope it's not Southeastern 20 or anything soon.
This is how smart we are. We spent a whole spring and really a whole 2 years thinking, what are we going to rename this? And we threw around a bunch of stuff. And then, you know what? We just changed the second digit of the number because that's the best
number.
Well, and it also had to do with who owned what, but in all seriousness. But yeah, it's fun. And people want to check that out. I always say this. Like, if you want Missouri coverage, Gabe's going to do a ton better than we do. You're the market leader and the best at it for a reason, and a good friend also. But if you want to kind of know how everybody stacks up against everybody else in the league, we do put a lot of time and effort into it. We do football, baseball, and basketball year round. If you're, dying for some basketball info in the summer, we do stuff every week. So I think if you're looking for a one-stop shop in those 3 sports, you probably like what we do.
All right, Chris, appreciate you, man. We'll, I don't know, I'm sure be texting back and forth on Saturday afternoon.
I can't imagine we don't do that.
All right, buddy. That is Chris Lee, vandysports.com, Southeastern 16. Always appreciate Chris's time. One of the best guys in this business, does a great job covering Vanderbilt. So go over there, check out the opposing side. Once again, remind you, pregame, postgame, all year, every week, brought to you by America's oldest brewery, Yuengling. Pick yourself up some Yuengling. Go to Faroe Field. If you are on our message board, you know a place you might be able to get some Yuengling and find a tailgate this weekend. So check that out if you're on Power Mizzou. But certainly lager up, enjoy responsibly. Should be a nice hot day. 3:15 kickoff Saturday afternoon at Faroe, Mizzou, and Vandy. We will have full coverage post-game show on Saturday night. Also, just want to give you guys a heads up. Coming Thursday afternoon, we are going to have a special podcast here on this YouTube channel, on your podcast channel. So just normally we go opponent preview and then we get to the game. We got one in between. So check it out tomorrow. Special guest I think you guys will all be excited about. We'll talk to you next time.